Very honored today to have a Mexican-American entrepreneur, Cuco Vega, is going to tell us a lot about his story and the things that he's doing. But we also want to talk a lot about what's happening in terms of ecosystems, because that's obviously a very important part of entrepreneurship. And kind of also tie into our theme of passion today, dive into a little bit about his story and what he's passionate about and why he does what he does. So that's what we started off the morning was a session about, you start with why, like, why do people do what they do as entrepreneurs, and where's the passion in that. So it's been a really great day just to explore all of that. But we'd love to hear a little more of your personal story, maybe that origin story. If you want to share that for a few minutes, that'd be great.
Of course. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Chuck for the invite. Well, very very quick bio. I was born in the Bay Area in Redwood City, but I actually grew up in Mexico, and then so went to college there, and then graduated, worked for a little bit, and then moved back to the Bay Area in 2008. And when I got to the Bay Area, that was probably one of the toughest moments to move to the US, right? Because there was a full economic crisis, right? The whole housing and financial system was crashing, right? So it was not probably the ideal moment to do like a life decision like that one. But I was lucky enough to start working at a biotech company in the Bay Area. And then from that biotech company, I realized that, even though I was an engineer, by trade, my major was in computer science, but I realized that what was my real passion was actually design,
Hmm.
right? And part of that move, to move to specifically to San Francisco, was because I wanted to be in a place where I felt like I could still use, all the knowledge and experience that I had from the engineering side, but also a chance to kind of have a transition in my career from engineering to design without having to choose one or the other, right? So for me, that was very important, and that's also one of the reasons why I move up here, right? And then after working at that biotech company, I was like, why am I, what is a guy like me doing at a biotech company? But I realized that there's so many opportunities and different, that made difference between big companies and smaller companies is
Hmm.
bigger companies normally tend to have like all kinds of roles that you can imagine, right? So this was a pretty big company. It's called Biorad. Um, and what I realized is that I didn't specifically have to, work at a design company to move on my career towards design. So I started working there, and then I pretty much started jumping from agencies to startups to other smaller tech companies. Um, because at the same time I was doing grad school on design. But where I think that I really started thinking more about um, moving towards entrepreneurship was in my last job.
Okay.
So my last job was at Citrix, which is a very big and
Yeah.
I would say a little older company in Silicon Valley, right? It's not like Google, Facebook, which are like the younger giants, right? But what I really learned in that company was, so number one, something that's very important and has been a motivator for myself, but also for my co-founder, and I would say for a lot of founders in general. Um, the motivator is realizing the value that you can add by yourself, right? So one of the things that happened at our last job is that we were working on this big project, right, for about a year, right? To pretty much, we were trying to create a suite of products with all the different smaller companies and products of those companies that Citrix had just acquired, right? So there's this big company that comes and buys all these startups, right? And then tries to create a suite with all of them, right? So it was a huge challenge, right? And it had a lot of different levels of complexity, right? From the branding perspective to the actual engineering perspective, but then the marketing perspective, sales, right? So we had to pretty much work with a huge team, interdisciplinary team, right? In a lot of different areas, and coordinate with engineers, marketers, salespeople, designers, all that, right? And after a full year, we actually created, I mean, I would say something very successful, right? But then, like in a lot of companies, there was a change in management, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this new management came in and pretty much said, you know what, I have to, make sure that my staple is in here, right? And everyone sees, what the new guy is doing. So got rid of, a lot of the middle management, including some of my bosses, and brought in an external agency to pretty much recreate everything that we had done,
Yeah.
right? Um, for me, what really made the difference was when I saw that pretty much what they were doing was not far from what we could do, right? And I realized, and I told back then my friend and now my co-founder, you know what? We could be doing this by ourselves, and we could be making the millions of dollars instead of the thousands, you know. Um, by ourselves. And that's
That's great.
initially what motivated us, right? And that's how we decided to first start building our own portfolio and kind of create our own, do some pro bono work so that we could have current clients and our, a portfolio of work so we could start actually going after paid clients. And after that, we just kept going. This was in 2015.
Okay.
And then, so we created our own digital agency, which was called 222. And then after that, the big change was after a year and a half of having our own agency, we realized that a lot of the stuff that we were doing, and for the people that we wanted to do it for, because we wanted to create a different kind of agency, right? An
Mhm.
agency that could work with anyone, that could help small businesses, right? But we realized that if we were going to do that, we were probably going to be broke,
Mm.
because small businesses and startups, and
Yeah.
micro businesses, they don't necessarily even have a budget for marketing or design, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Um, so we faced that. We faced that with a lot of potential clients. That even though we personally felt like we really wanted to work with them because some of them were amazing projects, but at the same time we had to pay the bills, right? So we just kept thinking of, how can we solve this? How can we solve this? And one day we just decided, to create a product that would make this more accessible for small businesses, right? And that's where we pretty much transitioned from being an agency to becoming a software startup, right?
Wow.
And the goal from that beginning, even though now it was more focused on software, was to help small businesses create their own digital marketing.
That's great. And that's Bexy then, BEXI.
Yes,
And I think
exactly.
it's
And that's when Bexy was born. Yeah.
yeah. Just I put the website link in the chat for anybody to take a look at. And I think that's a great story because I think you did a great job in starting off quickly with a services business because you can generate cash right away, right? You can get
Yes.
started. It doesn't take a lot of capital to get a services business off the ground. But to your point, they're difficult to scale and they tend to cap out at a certain level. And then also, like you said, if you're working with a lot of small businesses, the customer acquisition cost is high, the lifetime value is low. It's just very expensive to run, and then to get the scale, like you said, you could run yourself out of business if you're not careful. So, and that's smart entrepreneurs, I think, then take a look at, okay, how do you take that service that we're doing and begin to productize parts of it? And that sounds like where you've ended up with Bexy then.
Yes, exactly. That's pretty much how it happened. And right now we are in this transition period where if you go to the website, you can see that we have two different areas, right? So one
Mhm.
is pure marketing services, digital marketing services, where we work with companies and help them with everything from designing and defining their strategy, right? And then plan everything and then do the continuous work of releasing campaigns, analyzing, optimizing, all this stuff, right? And then on the other hand, the product that we're right now in beta. So if you have some issues with it, it's probably going to be because we're still working on a few fixes on the beta. But what's been really interesting is this not only allowed us to make money quicker, right? But we kind of went around the traditional startup model where now everyone just thinks it's easy. I have an idea. I raise pre-seed or
Mhm.
seed money, and then I build my stuff, right? But for us, it was also more, the goal was more to become also self-sustainable,
Mhm.
right? And with this model, we've been able to do that, right? So right now, even though we
Mhm.
raised some capital to accelerate the production of or the creation of the product, right? We do not depend on raising capital anymore,
That's
right?
great. Wow.
And yeah, and we now have a team of 30 people, and we can pretty much be self-sustainable. And probably when we do start thinking about raising the next round will be when we actually just want to scale super quick, right? So, and it's pretty much, the same thing where with any business, right? You don't raise money, or you don't get a loan, or you don't get capital um when you're struggling, but when you actually want to grow.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
You
feel
you
like
don't want to
we're
raise it.
we're get we're there. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be for a couple of great reasons. Why right? You don't want to be uh, someone knows that you're at risk and therefore they're going to press you on valuation. But likewise, too, if you have an operating business and you're generating cash, then you can support a higher valuation. You're not giving up as much equity when you go out to do a capital raise. So that's really great. And I think
Yeah.
too, your model maybe is a little more also I'll say conservative East Coast type model, right? How sometimes we think about startups here, which is, because we don't have access to all the capital in Silicon Valley. So you tend to think about how do you get the business going and get it somewhat sustainable before you go looking for capital. I know West Coast tends to be, let's get the capital first and figure out later, how to
Yeah.
make it work. And, it's interesting to see that approach that you've taken, which is a little bit more, I think, what we're used to on this side of the ocean.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I think that approach comes more from both my co-founder and I, being children of immigrants, and
Mm.
always having to, in our minds, it was never, even though we were in Silicon Valley, and my co-founder actually grew up here in the Bay Area.
Mm.
It was never in our minds, to think that, oh yeah, we can do a friends and family round, or we could just raise capital like this, right? Or it was
Yeah.
never in on top of our minds, because it was more like, no, we have to work, get some money, and then start it, and then do it, right? So I think it also came more from that side. But
Interesting.
yeah, but it is definitely true what you just said. Yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely consider that.
That's great. I mean, and congrats on getting to where you are with 30 people and building out a product. That's remarkable. And having, you've got a great background in engineering and design, which is really unique. And then having a lot of company experience, I think gives you a lot of fresh perspectives on, how the world works and what it means to build a business. So good job and all of that. I want to ask you a question because the focus of our event today is about passion. It's called Passion Palooza. So, how does kind of passion play into what you're doing? And one of the questions that we had asked in our panel this morning is, what are the drivers? What are the things that get you out of bed in the morning, jumping up, that you just can't wait to work on this?
It's very interesting. One thing, I mean, there are many things to say about passion, right?
Mm.
Number one, I would say the passion is normally something very personal, right? For me, it has been very personal, and one of my main passions is about making sure that I can build something bigger, or that I can kind of raise the bar higher than what my parents did, right?
Mm.
So both my co-founder and I, our parents came very young from Mexico, didn't speak the language, didn't know anyone, and just started working hard, right? And thanks to that, both cases, they got to put all of their kids through college. Now all of us, all of their children are professionals, and all this, right? So
Mhm.
for me, it's not only something that motivates me all the time, but it's also something that I feel like a personal commitment.
Mm.
Like I feel like I owe it to my parents, right? And through all of the effort and all of this and all of the suffering and all the hard work, right, to make sure that their what they sacrifice is worth it, right? um and also it's more like a personal, it's also like a personal challenge where I try to be honest with myself and just be like, okay, there is a reason why you got the chance to go to college and be a professional and work and get to do what you like for work, right? Which is something that not a lot of people even get to do, right? But in general, I even even if you don't have like a personal story that can be your passion or whatever, I think just there are different ways of finding your passion, right? It's not always about the personal story. For someone it might be just um, i I just want to get to whatever the next step in or the next phase in my life is, right? Sometimes it can be something so small or something super big, right?
Yeah.
um in that motivates you and that triggers that passion, right? Something that I think is important about passion too is you have to keep feeding that passion, right?
Mm.
Because um even when you have very clear what you're passionate about and what's your motivator, sometimes you can literally just wake up and don't feel like doing the work, don't feel like even getting up. I mean, it honestly has happened to me a lot. There has been moments where we're struggling, and even though I'm still thinking about all the motivators and what drives my passion personally, you still you can still feel tired, you can still
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
disappointed, you can still feel like passion is not going to be enough. And the truth is, passion is a huge igniter, but it's not just that, right? So you have to make sure that you're feeding and complementing your passion with organization, with
Mm.
structure, right? With um setting yourself up for success, right? With waking up early and have your day planned, and have short-term goals and midterm goals
Mm.
and all that stuff, right? Because if not, even though passion is really important, especially at the beginning, right? If you don't, I mean, if there's no passion when you're starting, then I don't I don't think there's a lot to do there, right?
Yeah.
But in order to keep going, a lot of times passion is just not enough, right? So it's very important that you also have in mind that you have to complement passion with other stuff, right?
I'm glad you say that because to your point that you want to be able to feel good about your day and have accomplished things, but you have to set up for that, right? You have to be organized mechanically to get those done. But also, I think you touched on it a bit in terms of, and this was covered by some of the students in a prior session today, really about self-care, right? Getting sleep, getting rest, being involved in other activities, right? Passion will take you part the way there, but it isn't the whole thing. You've got to take care of yourself. You have to be able to execute and be able to deliver because passion's only part of the equation.
Exactly. Yeah. And what you just said, I mean, health is super important. I mean, passion, the energy that you feel when you think of these things that motivate you and all that stuff, at the end, you know, I mean, your body, your energy, it's all chemical reactions, right? And if you don't eat well, if you
Yeah.
don't get your energy, if you don't rest, if you don't do all that stuff, then
Yep.
you're not gonna last. You're not gonna last. And let me tell you, when we started, of course, and this probably what happens to everyone, and you have to do it. But when we started, it was all-nighters,
Hmm.
3 4 days a week, to be honest, because it was just my business partner and I being designers, being creative directors, being account managers, project managers,
Yeah.
sales guys, so yes, at some point it's all about working hard, and if you have to not sleep, then you don't sleep or whatever. But there has to come a point where you actually really take care of your health, right? It's super important, because if not, it's like your passion is this flame that if you just like burn the whole thing once, then it's over, right? And then yeah, so you have to you have to think of ways of you know keeping it alive, right?
Yeah, and finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
It's in some respects with entrepreneurs, we can let startups define us, and then it becomes a difficult trap to escape. So we have to find something there. That's hard to do, but I appreciate those comments. And by the way, if anybody has any questions or comments, please drop them in the chat, or you can request to come on screen, and we can let you on screen. Let's shift a little bit to. I want to learn a little bit more about ecosystems. The students that know me and others, I've spent a fair amount of time in Mexico. One of my startups had a big customer base in Mexico. Always fascinated by Mexican and Latin American ecosystem. So just curious, what's happening right now in Mexico? I know you've done a lot of work in Guadalajara, specifically in that area.
Yeah.
What's happening in the Mexican entrepreneurial ecosystem?
So I think there are different interesting things happening, right? So first of all, something that's very, very impactful, right? That we had been waiting in the Mexican ecosystem for a while, because it was already happening in Brazil, in Argentina, and other countries in Latin America, was to start getting startups that had um, 1 billion valuations, right? Pretty much unicorns, right?
Unicorn, right?
And now, I remember when we had our first conversation, I was telling you that we had just had the very first Mexican unicorn, and today the second unicorn was announced, and it's very interesting, because it's not just a unicorn, but it's a crypto unicorn. It's a crypto exchange website called Bitso,
Yeah, I saw that.
right? And what's very interesting is, there has been an ecosystem in Mexico for a while, right? And every country in Latin America has their own like smaller ecosystems. But I think that there's another two things that are happening. Number one, the access to capital has been growing in Latin America, right? VCs and investment banks and angels all over the place are paying attention to what's happening in Latin America, right? And another thing is, due to the pandemic, right? What happened is, before, a lot of these companies who could actually raise capital, they had to come to Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
or at least somewhere in the US, right? To raise capital. And it was very hard for them, because there was a cost to come in here. There was a cultural cost as well, right?
Mhm.
Because you had to know someone in order to get appointments with VCs. You had to be connected. You had to somehow, but now, this has been pretty much globalized
Yeah.
officially, right? I know of founders all over Latin America and everywhere in the world. They are saying that now it's way easier for them to just schedule calls with VCs, that it was super hard to do before. But even VCs, this new reality kind of made them realize that they were actually missing on all these opportunities outside the US, right? So I think those three, and also the fact that now that we have more success cases in Mexico, right?
Mhm.
That's what I think it's driving also this, right? Plus a a historic um, pass on, tech companies from Silicon Valley having having offices in doing research and development in different cities in Mexico. I
Yeah.
think that has helped a lot, because these bigger companies coming in the 70s to Guadalajara, then Mexico City, Monterrey, um, a lot of people that started working there then left these bigger companies to start their own, right? And speaking of another very interesting success story in Guadalajara specifically is Intel. When they started in Guadalajara, they were looking for a place to start building their new research and development lab. But what they found is a local company that was doing something similar to what they were doing, and they acquired that company from Guadalajara and turned them into their own research and development lab, right?
Interesting.
So yeah, so what we're seeing now is also this like second wave of now startups from Silicon Valley that have moved to Guadalajara and have operations there. Bexy being one of those now,
Mhm.
which is where most of our team is right now.
Okay.
And so we found an opportunity that Silicon Valley just you know doesn't give you anymore, right? Which is to have access to good talent,
Yeah.
right? Especially when you're not funded by big VCs, or you haven't raised like huge rounds, right?
Interesting.
So I think a mix of all this stuff is happening, and not only in Mexico and all Latin America, right? A lot of interesting startups are coming out of Argentina, and
Mhm.
actually like Alt Zero, which is another Argentinian startup, also just got unicorn status as well very recently. But in general, in all Latin America, and there's more and more startups that are part of Y Combinator from Latin America. So I think there's a lot of interesting things coming from there.
It's fantastic. And I think we're seeing some things that had been happening, but certainly COVID accelerated that. So increasingly that portability of talent, but also the portability of capital, which is
Yes.
what I'm starting to find, quite amazing. And
Yeah.
then just, this kind of unknown talent in Latin America, of just these great companies. I've been involved in some more pitch activities, listening to pitches from startup founders in Latin America, and just the types of companies, the talent that we're just so unaware of here that have been developing. And now, but the challenge has always been about capital, right? Because capital sources
Yeah.
haven't been as effective in Latin America. But now, as you said, you begin to see that capital be more portable. So I think the coming years should be quite bullish for startups coming out of Latin America, especially those that want to expand, beyond their borders.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And one of the things is exactly that. I think capital had been, for a while, it had been the element that was missing, right? Because there was talent there, there were some companies there, but in order to really grow and in order to get to the global market, you definitely need capital, right? I mean, there are different components normally to an ecosystem, right? You need the education, you need the talent,
Yeah.
but you also need the capital, right? If not, it's very hard. I mean, one of the reasons why Silicon Valley has been what it is, right? And now many more hubs in other cities are starting, is because people are realizing that concentration of capital definitely helps ignite all this, right?
Yeah. And then, as you know, success breeds success, right? So, you talk about the unicorns developing. All of a sudden now it's like, oh, and the same thing's happening here in Philadelphia, where we've had, some unicorns over the years, but most recently we've had a big business to consumer unicorn develop, a company called GoPuff, and that just begins to feed the ecosystem. And the flywheel
Yeah.
starts to accelerate. So it takes time, but once you're doing that and see that, then it just becomes a very beneficial environment, and hopefully then more good things come of it.
Yeah, and you know what? Also, Chuck, something interesting about unicorns. There are studies that show how unicorns actually help local hubs grow faster and create more companies, because what happens is those unicorns grow super fast. The people, there are employees in those unicorns, then leave and start their own
Right.
startups, right? And
Yeah.
now but now with the experience of high growth, right? And then this, keeps happening, and it keeps going and going. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
That's great.
interesting.
Do you see, again, we go back to, what COVID has really accelerated in terms of behaviors. Do you see that this increasing collaboration between ecosystems? So whereas before you had to be in Silicon Valley and everything was there, but now like what you're experiencing where so you've got Silicon Valley and Guadalajara and there's collaboration there. Do you see more of that model in coming years?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally think that a lot of things are gonna stop being so centralized in Silicon Valley. And I mean, right now there are a lot of places that are starting to get very interesting, right? Like new tech hubs, right? Like in the US already, of course, New York, Austin, Miami, and other cities are pushing strong, but in other cities as well, right? I mean, Israel is very well known for their startup ecosystem, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
London as well. So I mean, I think what's going to happen is all these new tech hubs are gonna gain probably more respect, and they're gonna grow, right? And also the fact that I mean, a lot of people in capital has left Silicon Valley, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I'm not saying that necessarily the funds left, right? But it's more like they're also now paying attention everywhere now, and also now they are competing with a lot of the huge Asian funds as well, right? Like
Yeah.
there are very big funds in China and Japan, and there are already looking into Latin America and Southeast Asia and even the US.
Yeah, there are some quite big ones. Certainly,
Yeah,
like SoftBank is a classic example, right? Where
yeah,
Japanese fund putting capital all over the world. It's
yeah,
really interesting and amazing. So, and I think that, and they're a mega investor, but I think you certainly see that filtering down to these smaller VC funds and maybe certainly even
yeah,
angel investors. Where in the past, as an angel investor, you'd want that startup being in your backyard, basically, right? And now it's like, you're
yeah,
in you're Mexico or you're in anywhere in the world. It's like, I want to learn more about this opportunity because I can see you, I can access you, we can have conversations all the time, and the tools are there to really to not just transfer information, but really to transfer knowledge about what's happening. So that's great. We've got
yeah.
a lot of questions in the chat here. Let me see if I can kind of pick up a couple of here. So about diversity. So as an immigrant entrepreneur, how important is having a diverse staff to you?
Look, I think diversity. I think diversity is very important, right? Because what it allows a company to do is not just to kind of fill this like check mark of what people care about right now, but um I do feel that we really limit ourselves when we don't have diverse cultures, diverse ways of thinking, diverse backgrounds, like all this stuff, right? What diversity of employees brings to a company is pretty much a lot of different points of view, a lot of ways of being resilient, a lot of ways
Mm.
of living with grit. Like one of the things that I always tell, I mean, on my own experience, right, and in having a lot of friends that come from different parts of Latin America, is in Latin America, like for us, it's so part of our lives to have to deal with stuff like all the time, right? It's like we've always had like bad governments. We've always had like issues with like insecurity and like all this stuff, right? Um, And then being, being in the US, right, and being considered a minority, that adds some more stuff. So it's like, and then you consider all the other minorities in the US, and it's each one in their own has advantages to bring to a company, right? From a different cultural perspective, right? Just because the way that they grew up is still, an American, but with a different point of view, right? And the same with every other minorities, right? So I definitely think it's very important, and you know what? It's, for me, it's just a very smart thing to do. Like, why wouldn't you rather have multiple points of view, multiple opinions, right? The way to actually help your team connect with more diverse audiences as well, right? Which, yeah. So for me, it's more like a no-brainer, right, than a requisite. So I think that's pretty much my take on diversity.
And certainly, if you consider that your markets for many companies today are global markets, that you're not just going to be in one, serving one demographic or one need. It's going to be very diverse. So to have a team that's diverse and able to help effectuate that and deliver value to a wide set of constituencies, I think becomes just part of the core of every company today.
Yeah,
that's great to see. There's a question here about marketing, the future of online marketing. So what are your thoughts on the increasing role of influencers?
That's a tricky one. Look, the only thing I can say is definitely it has been, well, I was going to say the future, but it's the present. That's being honest. A lot of what we do is with our current clients, right? It's more focused on like biotech companies and tech companies and stuff. So we have actually had to work with very specific types of influencers, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think, let's say, there are industries where there's, I don't know, I'm going to say fashion, for example, sure, is an industry where you can find tons of influencers, right? They want to be part of that. But for example, for us, sometimes we've had to work with influencers on the biotech industries, right? Or with influencers specifically on life science and research, right? So what I think is that little by little, just like any other, in any other type of marketing and advertising, influencers are gonna get more and more specialized. And they're going to get more specific to industries and verticals, right? I think there are going to be some industries that are going to be like influencers saturated, right? But hopefully this is going to also help, people who want to be influencers and who want to do that as a career, right? To also realize about spatialization, right? And about focusing more on niche in smaller audiences, or more focused audiences, right? And I think it's pretty much what everything goes through, right? Like social media in general, at the beginning, right, doing advertising in social was just like the wild west. And now it's so advanced, right? It's like so I think with influencers, something like that is probably going to happen.
That's great. Yeah, I think we just did, like I said a little bit earlier, a session on TikTok, and it's interesting to see again how brands are using that, how people are developing their skills as influencers and monetizing that. But to get back to your point and why Bexy exists, right? I mean, to navigate the landscape of all the possible ways for businesses that do marketing and thinking about that from all the various platforms and approaches and methods, and then you have influencers. It's overwhelming, and I think there's going to be quite a few new tools and capabilities that need to be developed in coming years to really try to help companies navigate that landscape, because it's so complex.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you guys live it every day, so it's I don't need to tell you that. Yeah. So you obviously believe in the power of education. You've got some degrees behind you, and we're a school of
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. So I'd love to get your perspective, and it ties into one of the questions from Dean DeCarolis about the value of entrepreneurship education. Do you think that entrepreneurship and certainly education around entrepreneurship is important to increase awareness and skills for young people?
Yeah, I definitely think education is really important. Now, what people consider formal education, I think, is what is probably gonna continue evolving, right? And what I definitely see a lot is that the 4 or 5 year degrees and the very structured majors and career paths and all that stuff. I think that's definitely gonna change, right? I think education is gonna become more flexible. I think that now it's more. I feel like it kind of goes in waves, right? Where industries need more specialized people but then everyone is like so specialized, and now the next wave is like, no, we need people that are more well-rounded, right? And then it goes back to specialized. So I think that that's going to affect education a lot, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of more specialized universities and online schools, right, and online educational platforms, right, not even degree focused, right, but I feel like it's going to be a mix of all of that, right? But I do believe that like, if you're not continuously learning and improving, right? Um, it's a hurdle for you
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur, for sure.
Well, things
Yeah.
obviously, you've seen this. I mean, things, the pace to change is exponential, and just to be able to keep up with it and retool yourself means that you're going to need to be that lifelong learner, right? You're always going to need to find ways to develop new skills and put them into action. And I think to your point, higher education is going to see very exciting times in coming years and new models for deployment. We've introduced something. Our school at Drexel is a 3-year degree, and it's a very accelerated degree program for students who are majoring in entrepreneurship. Because we know many of them are, they're chomping at the bit. They want the degree, they want the network, they want the credibility that comes with it, but they also want to get started, right? And we give them a pathway to put themselves, into action as quickly as possible. And we're really excited about that in the coming years.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a great point, Chuck, because I mean, you want to make sure that you're learning, but I mean, definitely, if you have the entrepreneurial spirit, you also want to get to it as soon as possible, right?
Yeah.
So something that I've also seen a lot on universities is that now classes are more like a combination of what you said, right? Like learning, but also having some experience, right? Because there's nothing. I think the worst part of the 5 year or 4 year degrees in the traditional way is that you would graduate after 4 years of just studying and studying and studying with no real life
Yeah.
experience, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know why it took so long for industry and education system, right, to realize that there was that gap, right? But I'm
We're,
glad that now a lot of universities are doing
yeah.
that.
And Drexel's a great model for that. Matter of fact, I think it was last year we just celebrated our 100th year of what's called co-op. And co-op is that combination of industry, work, business, and education. So
Cool.
most students, when they come to Drexel, are coming for 5 years, but they do 3 separate 6-month co-ops, internships, if you want to call them that. And they come out with 18 months of experience after those 5 years. And it's fantastic, right? So that's a really
Yeah.
nice mix of learning, but also putting it into practice right away, as opposed to, like you said, going and just going to classes and doing nothing else, and then you come out, you might know a bunch of things, but you're not prepared to work, right? You're not prepared
Exactly.
instantly to create value for employers.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see more and more models like that, and more flexible models of education in the coming years. And and employers need that, right? I'm sure you see that too, especially on the tech side of things, where you can't get enough tech talent these days. I'm sure
Yeah.
it's really challenging.
There's a huge shortage of tech talent, and this is not just in the US. This is worldwide.
Everywhere.
This is
Yeah.
worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another problem that certainly needs to be solved. We only have a few more minutes here. This is going great. This is a great conversation. What advice for young entrepreneurs? We kind of asked that from everybody. And, put yourself back in your 21, 22-year-old shoes, and what advice would you give yourself? But maybe contextually today, with the way the world is, what advice might you have, especially for students who are focusing on entrepreneurship and really are thinking about how to change the world?
Yeah. So look, something that I've been talking to my co-founder a lot lately is, when we started, we were so focused on the technology. We're gonna create an artificial intelligence that will create the campaigns automatically for us. We're not gonna have to do anything, right? So people are just gonna go in there, and then there's gonna be an AI that's gonna do everything for them, right? And then the idea kept evolving once we put it in front of people, and then we started learning, and people were like, well, I just need this, I just need that, I would rather do this, I would rather do it that way, I don't understand why you're doing this, right? So one of the things that I feel we learned on the last few years is, there are things that technology will change. There are things that will always be continuously evolving,
Mhm.
but there are other things that are basic that you have to always make sure that you don't lose track of. And one of them is, when you're going to start a business, before you start building, raising capital, whatever, right? Make sure that there is going to be a market for it.
Yeah.
There's no technology, honestly, there's no technology, there's no crypto, there's no AI that solves that issue, right? If there's no market for it, it doesn't matter how good it is. It doesn't matter how advanced, how crazy your idea, how revolutionary it is, right? If we are thinking of business, you have to make sure that there will be a market for it. And my recommendation is, no matter what, your very first step has to be test that your idea, even when it's just an idea, right? the that you start testing it. How do you test an idea? Well, the very, very first step is, if you know what you're creating, if you know who would be, the ideal user or the ideal consumer of that, start talking to those people, right?
Yeah.
Start telling them, hey, so do you think that something like this would solve your issues? Or the other way, actually, it's more useful if you talk to those people and then just start asking questions like, hey, so how do you do this right now? What are your pain points right now? What are the issues that don't let your business grow as fast as you would like, right? um, and then you will learn if what you're trying to solve is actually an issue in the first place, right? One of the biggest things that we learned is, in the first couple of years, that we were trying to, I mean, our product has been, changing a lot from what it was initially. We have pivoted that product like 4 times, to be honest.
Okay.
But the difference is that now we have done market studies that prove that the value, even though the current beta version may not have all the full functionality that we want, um, the final value is something that people want, right? And we know that because now we have been able to run market studies, right? When you're starting and you don't have a budget to do a market study, then just talk to the people that will be your potential audience, right? Because really, there's, even if, I mean, you can create an AI that does magic tricks, but if there's no one
Yeah.
that will be willing to pay for that, then
I really hope that, that some of the students listening in on this are in my current class called Launch It, because that's exactly what we're focusing on, right? It's go talk to customers, right?
yeah,
Before you do much of anything else, okay, you got to formulate some basic thoughts about your idea, but you've got to figure out who's your target customer, and build an empathy map and build a life cycle, really try to get inside their heads, and then go talk to them, right?
yes,
Spend time with them, interview them, and have a bit of a script. You can go off script a bit, but go and learn something, because at the end of the day, like you said, you've got to be able to be solving a problem for people. And if you haven't figured that out yet exactly what they need, then you're going to have a mismatch, and you're going to build a bunch of things that aren't the right things to build, right? And I know I've done that through my career as an entrepreneur. We've built a lot of stuff that nobody ever needed, and it's just because you just made a bunch of assumptions about,
Exactly.
we think people would like this, and it's like, you know what, they don't like it, or they don't need it. So that's
yeah.
Hey. I have a question here. Any do's and don'ts for online marketing? Again, online marketing, anything that today is kind of like top of mind that companies should do or shouldn't be doing?
So do's, do segment, do focus, right, your digital marketing on the right audience, right? Make sure that when you're gonna spend some money on digital marketing, if you are gonna spend some money, make sure that it's going to only the people that would potentially buy your product or your service, right? I think that's one of the main ones. Definitely, be creative, right, and explore options, right? I mean, we were talking before about influencers, right? I feel like there are some industries where influencers are or work better, right? But not every audience necessarily works the same way, right? So consider that. Know your target audience very, very well, right? Because there's nothing worse than do marketing or advertising broad enough that your money is not really being impactful, right? So there's no ROI pretty much, right? So for me, I think you should have a very clear understanding of who your audience is, and make sure that your digital marketing is very, very targeted. Make sure that you do a good use of marketing automation tools, that your whole strategy, because this is not just about technology, right? In digital marketing, a lot of it has to do with the strategy, right? To make sure that you are thinking not just on the campaigns, right, but beyond that, you're gonna have your different audiences, and you're going to think of how you're going to tackle each one of them, right? Not everyone is going to respond to Instagram ads. Not everyone's going to respond to stories or digital or direct emails, or so you have to really study your audience and make sure that you are getting to them the right way. So make sure that all your tools are very, very linked to your strategy and what you want to get out of it, right? You may want to approach a segment of your audience in a certain way, and maybe a certain audience in a different way, right? So make sure that you know exactly who your audience is, and then you get directly to them.
That's great. Yeah, and it's very complicated today, and TikTok wasn't a platform that anybody cared about a year ago. Right now it is, right?
Yeah.
Now you see all types of sponsored content, and certainly as brands, you need to think about how do you reach audiences, and who's on TikTok, and how do you segment that, and so forth. So,
and also something important, Chuck, is to follow all these technologies, because they keep evolving, right? Like right now, actually, one of the industries where it's more popular is actually education. There are studies now that are saying that, for example, a lot of people are getting their financial education from influencers on TikTok, especially young people. So young people are learning about how to start, building wealth from influencers on TikTok. So, make sure that you're using the right platforms for the right purpose as well, right?
It's fascinating. And I've seen some of those, and it's fascinating because I've learned some things actually. It's like, I didn't know how to do that. It's like, oh, okay, that's how you do that. And it's, it's a 30-second to 2-minute video, but you can learn a hell of a lot, just to be able to go and try something. It's like, okay, now I know at least where to start, and I can go from there. So fascinating. Well, Cuco, I think this has been really great. We're just about at the end here, but I really want to thank you for your time today. It's been great to get to know you. Look forward to tracking your progress in the coming months and years, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to meet either in Mexico or Silicon Valley at some point. And
yeah, I would love to, of course.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again so much.
No, thank you for the invite. Thanks everyone for your time. I hope some of the stuff that I shared is helpful.
Definitely.
Yeah, and thanks again.
Good. All right, good. And for everybody on line here, we have our final segment of the day, 5 o'clock, our musical performance by the Entre Professors, John Wilson and Damian Salas. So come back at 5 o'clock for that session, and otherwise we'll see you a little bit later. Thanks again.
Cool. No, thanks you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.